Hey everyone, welcome to StormCrows TV, where two lit chicks talk about all things reading and writing. And this is our continuing series of A Song of Ice and Fire read-along, specifically Game of Thrones.
I do think I'm coming down with the case of strep, so just be forewarned, Allegra will be doing a lot of the talking today.
Which is fine, because we're covering Dany's first chapter, so we all know I could talk for 2 hours by myself.
And if you don't know, you'll find out soon enough.
So we're going to jump into this quick before M's voice dies. Emily, would you like to summarize the 3 chapters we read this week?
I will do my very best. Okay, so from what I've gathered, Catelyn is weird. Like, weird in that she hates everything except her husband, maybe. I can't tell. Anyway, so she goes to tell Ned that his BFF from way back when is dead. He's super sad about it until a shiny king is waved in front of his face, or rather the prospect of one. Then it's like, Jon Arryn who? Jump from Snow, Ice, and Doom to the Targaryens, who are evil, but are also kids? So, are they really evil, or just dumped on because Dad was crazy? Dany has a creepy brother, but gotta give props because he kept them alive so far, doing this beggar king thing. Only now to get his crown, he's pimping his sister out to Jason Momoa, or, as I guess some people prefer to call him, Khal Drogo. Then she goes to this party with Creeper and Plump Dude, and she's the only chick. And that's weird. I'd be scared too, Dany. Back in the north, the king arrives with the queen, but screw her, gonna go down and say hi to my lost Lenore and her kingdom by the other dead Starks. Suddenly, Ned doesn't seem as happy as before. Guess winter's coming or something, because he has to be Hand of the King now. Hard to tell at this point, because Starks don't seem to be happy about anything. But they do have a flair for the dark and gloomy. If Emo was a person, it'd be Ned. Also, who the hell has let Robert stay king this long?
Jon Arryn, presumably? I've really never understood that one. Speaking of things I've never understood, let's just start the discussion with Catelyn 1 chapter. So, like Em said, the chapter opens in Winterfell's gigantic Godswood, where she tracks down her husband to tell him the bad news about Jon Arryn, aka Ned's foster dad / brother-in-law, being dead. Ned is really eager to send Cat and the little kids south to hang out with Cat's sad sister Lysa, who's Jon Arryn's widow, because everyone's related in the show. But whoops, Cat drops this other bomb about King Robert coming. And I'd drop a bomb to avoid hanging out with Lysa too, but we can talk about her later. Anyway, I wondered what you would think of Cat, and because I've always thought she was weird, kind of, too.
My take on Cat is she seems very bland, but not in a failing POV sort of way. It's more of that's just who she is. I didn't buy that this is a woman who's in love with her husband at all. And the differences are very, not to be punny, but they're very stark. Like, they worship different gods. She's used to different things. It's very much a cold sort of interaction between them. And I don't know if that was intended, but I'm reading that these are two people who maybe love each other in a courtly sense, but not in a romantic sense.
I think maybe it's because he was packing so much exposition, and world building is really kind of tucked into Catelyn's intro into that Godswood. And you do get her thinking about how different everything is. But it's kind of weird because she's been married to the dude for like 13 years, 14 years, 15 years, something. You should be over it by now, Catelyn.
Well, I think that came at the cost of this woman just seems like she holds a grudge and is bitter, and maybe that serves her character. I know only what I have seen in the show, which is very little, but I don't know if that's the point they may wanted to make in the book.
I don't think Catelyn ever really does get over anything, so that's accurate.
Then he did a very good job, because this would possibly be something that she is still stuck on 14 years later.
Also, I think when we first discussed this in the notes, you pointed out that Ned greeting her with "Where are the children?" every day was a very strange "Hello, honey."
It's almost like I don't trust you. What have you done with the kids? Um, I guess in medieval times, that's a fair question. Like, where are the kids? I guess at any moment one could have died of plague.
I don't know. It's a very odd. Maybe that's just the Stark way. So, yeah, that's all about Cat. We get some foreshadowing. They talk about the Isle of Faces, the very different culture between the North and the South, and you get the first hint of the seven of the Andals versus the uh, old gods of the Godswood and Starks and the First Men. So there's definitely a religious gap that Catelyn's the first one to talk about.
Ned doesn't really seem to be much of a believer of anything. Anything. Including when it's like right in his face, like, oh, the others are not real. Well, you used to say that about the direwolves. Well, you got me there. Moving on. Good job, Ned.
And I think whenever we get into the first Ned chapter, it does kind of reveal that he is very slow to act and very conservative, and yet for the North, he's wildly liberal. Like, the North just does not change. 8,000 years is not long enough for the North to change his mind.
I like a sword, though.
Oh, yes. And we do get the first Valyrian steel sword, Ice. A little bit more detail about how there aren't many of those. Cough, cough. Look, we're going to talk about Valyria. Cough. Oh, and also, because I know I promised Naomi I'd continue to point out stuff about the direwolves, Rickon is scared of his sigil. Or rather, scared of his new direwolf puppy. So yeah, I think it's interesting that all the other kids are totes all happy to have a direwolf, and Rickon, even though he's 3, is like, I don't know about this. This doesn't seem like a good idea.
I think I would be more understanding if it was a full-size direwolf or a fully grown direwolf, but this is also a puppy. And so it's not like, proportions come into play here.
Yeah, the 3-year-old's scared of the puppy. I think maybe we're dropping a hint about Rickon. And Ned also being like, well, he might be 3 now, but he won't be 3 forever, and winter is coming. Man up, Rickon.
That's good parenting even now, not just in medieval times.
Right? Good job, Ned Stark. There are no parents for the Targaryen children. The quote-unquote bad guys, or mortal bad guys, since they're not ice demons. Turns out they're a couple of kids. So we get into the head of Daenerys Stormborn, who is 13 and has 99 problems, and most of them are her brother. And the fact is, she's getting sold to a barbarian warlord, and you thought 8th grade sucked for you. She is Viserys' mental abuse punching bag and dragged to this creepy party where she's the only chick in a mansion full of important dudes, and nothing weird and Weinstein-y is about to happen, right? So, major impressions from M.
The perspective from Dany makes it real hard to believe the Starks, yay unreliable narrators, considering they basically killed children and slaughtered people a lot. And Dany has gone through hell, so she's really the bad guy here. I would not sit here and argue the morality or the nobility of Viserys. He's awful. But how much of that is a product of having to survive in a world where he had everything and then watched it violently taken from him when he was 7? So how are they actually threats to anyone?
It's really easy to hate Viserys when you first read these books, but I didn't realize until someone laid out a timeline for me long time ago. Viserys was Bran's age. Like, literally 7 or 8 when they had to flee Dragonstone in the middle of the night. Yeah, he's damaged. Of course he's damaged. Dany even says in this chapter she was like 5 when they had to run away from Braavos. And basically 11, 12-year-old Viserys was tasked with keeping a 5-year-old little sister alive on his own with no friends, running from assassins. I mean, she's not dead, so there's that. Whoever Viserys was is long gone, and he's just a pile of nerves and paranoia.
I know it's easy to blame the madness in a Targaryen line because his king was insane, or his dad was insane, but how much of Viserys being this way is genetic and how much of it is they made him this way.
Oh yeah, I think you can definitely argue that Viserys was created. I think Viserys takes a lot of heat for being completely crazy when really that kid didn't stand a chance.
That party, man, that was a weird party. Like, if I walked into the room and I was the only female, I'd wonder if maybe I took a turn into the restroom.
Yeah, that party is very weird. I am going to take a request to go off about the party and Pentos in general from Twitter user Red God Thought. So I may get a little spoilery for M, but luckily you're delirious, so you probably won't remember.
It's very possible that I mean, who are we, really?
Oh, you were wondering why Jorah is at the party, right?
I was, because it seemed weird. Like, just because he was a poacher, I get why he was banished and whatnot. I don't get why he's at the party, though.
I actually kind of go with the theory that he's there to as a shiny Westerosi knight to distract Viserys while Illyrio does the actual bargaining. But that party is fishy as
Yeah.
because Dany is sitting there and she's figured out she's basically being slave traded because um the so there's a section of fandom that says Dany on her way back through Essos later in the series shouldn't attack Pentos because there are no slaves in Pentos. There's no slavery in Pentos. But in this chapter, Dany literally has the line, there is not slavery in the free city of Pentos, but there are slaves. She is being waited on by some of Illyrio's slaves. And one of these girls gets given to her as a gift, with gets sent with her as kind of a wedding present. So you know the girl's property. Um, but anyway, Dany is getting ready, and one of the girls is telling her all of Khal Drogo's slaves were golden collars, blah blah blah. And then as they're getting Dany dressed for this party, she's getting a golden torque put on her neck, which technically was
Yeah,
the
that
sign
was
of
nice.
Illyrian royalty, but it looks like a slave collar. There's slavery in Pentos, and I guess people just don't pay attention to what Dany notices.
Dany is extremely observant, like to the point where it's almost cat-like. Not Catelyn-like, but cat-like in that she picks up on so much. And I get that that's also the product of having to constantly be on the run and the paranoia and the abuse of her brother. I love how Martin really encapsulates the demeanor of someone in an abusive situation, because her hackles are raised constantly and she picks up on smells, she picks up on little gestures, and as you said, the symbolism of the golden collar. Like, these are things that I don't know that as a prepubescent child, not child, I would have picked up on. Just because it's, it seems innocuous to me, but like to her, like everything is so picked up on.
You can kind of feel the abusive situation rolling off of Dany. This girl never had a childhood. Even if you contrast like her point of view with Bran, who's pretty astute for a 7-year-old boy. Now, Dany is way, way more observant than any normal, self-absorbed 13-year-old would be. And she picks up on some weird stuff in this party. She picks up that there are people from all over the world gathered at this party. There's more than one call at this party. There are people from the port of Ib, from all across Essos. There's Jorah's kind of the Westerosi representative. Something is going down, and she knows enough to not trust Illyrio. They have been living with him for 6 months, which is a pretty long time to be in one place for the two of them. And Illyrio is being too nice as far as Dany is concerned. And Viserys is lapping it up, and Dany is thinking, yeah, what's the catch? And now the catch is going to be she's going to marry Khal Drogo. But anyway, I was going to talk about what that Red God thought and some other people had talked about was, sorry, put on your delirium cap. This party really, really is fishy because if you look at it after you've read the later books, this is screaming Blackfires. Blackfires are bargaining away a trueborn Targaryen for their own ends, quite clearly, because this party has people from all over. you have Illyrio stirring and making deals, and maybe there's more than one deal going down. Like, it's not just about Khal Drogo, it's something else is happening behind the scenes as well as this Khal Drogo thing. The Blackfire plot isn't something that we really got brought in until probably 3 books later. It's been 60 years or something since the last Blackfire rebellion. I think Barristan Selmy is the only one who even remembers it. But it's not that long if a few people make it past 50. Either that or it's a cult. And I would guess more for the this is making deals for something way bigger than Dany and Viserys. They are yet again being used as the shiny public distraction. These poor kids have been pawns since Rhaegar fell on the Tridents. I will stop talking about Daenerys and how awesome I love her chapters, and I love how, like Em said, I love how she's so perceptive. But now we're gonna go back to Ned, back across the narrow sea. Oh, I don't.
You don't have to stop talking about Daenerys, because I think it's also important to point out the contrast that this sets up, because there's a reason why we read 3, and it was because reading Ned after Dany was very eye-opening. You had, what happened with the rebellion and the usurper, and like Ned is a boogeyman. Baratheon is this big creature that they have to be afraid of, and we go back to Ned and it's like, oh, these are bromies,
Right.
I hope that made sense. The delirium has set in.
No, I think it makes sense. Like, I think Viserys even refers to them as the usurper and his dogs, and like the worst one of all is the cold-eyed Ned Stark. And then you fall back into Ned Stark's point of view when he's thinking about his kids and normal stuff, and he's not a dead-eyed killer anymore. But yeah, it sets up the cognitive dissonance. There is no, I guess, 1000% reliable narrator. Everyone has their own truth. So basically, for Ned, we get the awkward, brotastic brony reunion and bonus crypt tour. Bobby B loved Lyanna, the Stark tombs are creepy, and now Ned's got to be prime minister. Oh, and the Lannisters are jerks. We don't like them. And Robert is freaking terrible at political strategy. Oh my god.
But on the bright side, we got to walk through a crypt, and that's completely my aesthetic. And I particularly dig the part where, they're walking through these endlessly long crypts, and Ned has that moment of mortality where he realizes there's empty spaces for him and his children, but he doesn't want to think about that. And I'm like, way to be the bright light, Ned, because you're just so chipper and happy constantly. I also like Lyanna is buried there, and apparently she begged to be buried in the Stark crypt, and I don't know if this is just more of a, the Starks are sort of obsessed with darkness, and maybe that means they're also obsessed with death and all its trappings. And why is she buried specifically where she is?
It's a good question that if he ever finishes the books, we might find out. Why is Lyanna buried among the kings of winter? Also, the whole point of the Starks all go to the grave are buried with their effigies holding iron or holding swords, which seemed like a massive extravagance, especially going back 5,000 years or whatever. But then you get Martin having chosen or been inspired by the She for a lot of the whites and the Children of the Forest, and cold iron and swords being protection against the She. So maybe we're gonna revisit the whole swords in the crypt later.
And I like the folk stories because, I said in Catelyn's chapter, Ned doesn't really seem to believe in anything. As he's walking through the crypt and he sees the statues of the old Starks, there's this line he makes where, they all have the swords, and the swords supposedly are what keeps the spirits in their crypts. With those swords gone, does that mean that the spirits are roaming? And he hopes not. And it's this is the first time he really says anything that would indicate that he's not completely all about realism and what he can see.
There are some very interesting tinfoil theories about the Starks and the Targaryens. Dany can walk into almost boiling hot water without feeling burned, and Ned prefers being in freezing cold weather and doesn't really feel it. The Targaryens have some dragon blood. Maybe the Starks have some ice blood. Cough, cough.
I like that theory. I'm gonna run with it.
There's nothing to disprove it so far.
The other thing, I guess, about the crypt that's extremely interesting is, okay, so I guess this question's for you. Are Ned and Bobby B, like, even still friends? Because it seems to be forced at this point.
They grew up as brothers. Like, I think Ned fostered in the Vale from age 7 or so, 11 maybe, 11 to 19, and then they fought a war together. So I think there's definitely some deep bonds of comradeship and brotherly love. See, they fought the war 15 years ago and won. Then they fought the Greyjoy Rebellion in the North 9 years ago. That's how Theon is staying with the Starks. It's been 9 years since they saw each other. And I think maybe they've drifted because Ned's shocked at the way Robert looks. Like, they've drifted a lot in those 9 years. And it's definitely finding a rebalance. I do think they care about each other, but I think they've lost touch. Thinking about the fact that they live where there's no instant messenger, there's no phone call, there's not even telegraph. If he wants to send a letter to Robert, that's like a month getting to Robert and then a month coming back.
Even with the birds.
Well, the birds are really for the maesters. Those don't get passed around for just normal mail. You'll get birds if there's declarations of war or offers of peace or major issues, but not like, hey, Rob, what's up? And I also think maybe they have kind of let this friendship go. And maybe Robert is finally, now that Jon Arryn is dead, is having one last brain cell fire. Maybe full-on Lannister hegemony isn't a great idea. But at the same time, he's handing over massive amounts of power to the Lannisters. And yeah, you're married to one, but Cersei's horrible. Like, why would you do this? Oh yeah, you're in debt to them. Yeah, Robert is so bad at being king.
He's probably bad in the decision-making process, just from what I've gathered. And so it's like he's standing there at Lyanna's grave saying, I wish I could kill Rhaegar for what he did. And it's like, well, you did. He's like, yeah, but I wish I could just kill him again and again. And it's like, what did Rhaegar actually do? That was so bad, because at this point, I don't trust either of these two guys.
It's weird now reading it, because I think originally when this was written, it was very much like the standard fantasy protagonist was supposed to be Ned Stark. So everyone was supposed to read this and just assume Ned was going to be right all the time. But if you're reading this with hindsight 2020, expectations have shifted. And as for what Rhaegar did, it's a good question. We know that Rhaegar took off with Lyanna. Robert called it abduction. I don't think Lyanna would have used the same terminology by lots of indication, but maybe she did get kidnapped. Maybe she was wanting to be kidnapped. We don't know. But Lyanna was like 15, 16. Rhaegar was in his 20s at least. So that upsets modern sensibilities, but for a 10th century analog, we definitely know that Lyanna didn't want to marry Robert. So running off with the crown prince might have seemed like the best alternative available.
I mean, I can't blame the girl. From what I know of Robert, I wouldn't have wanted to marry him either.
Right, like Robert's very, he'd be kind of a fun, like, if he wasn't king, he'd be cool, boisterous, bruiser, uncle type.
Yeah, he's someone you have drinks with.
Yeah, like
someone you have babies with.
No, and by all accounts, he was a brilliant soldier, a great fighter, a pretty good tactician even, but he's good at war. He's not good at ruling. He's not good at being king. He's not great at being a dad. Although I think some of that was less his fault than Cersei.
Well, I look forward to the next bit that we're going to do, and that will be our next episode.
2 weeks from now.
Jon, Catelyn 2, and Arya.
Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Comment if you have any questions, if there's anything we didn't cover in this that you want us to talk about. We can always go back and discuss stuff. We can also talk on social media. Our Twitter links are included somewhere. Instagram, Facebook, Two Lit Chicks, the group. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you want to hear. If there's any questions in the upcoming chapters, I will definitely be asking and talking to people on Twitter and Instagram about that.
And as always, have a lovely day. Bye.
Bye.